Rewind of the Living Dead is a review show, so spoilers are ahead.
As a special effects artist, Damien Leone played to his strengths while making several short films where he also introduced a character named Art the Clown. A silent killing machine, Art became a centerpiece in several appearances across Leone's projects, such as The Ninth Circle as well as the anthology All Hallows Eve. After realizing that Art the Clown had only actually appeared in about 20 minutes of footage throughout all his past projects, Leone decided it was time to give his murderous clown a feature film. Leaning on his creativity as a special effects artist, Leone created a monument to the maniacal in a movie that featured Art the Clown stalking a pair of random girls who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. What results is a gruesome display of blood, guts, and gore that one reviewer called unpredictable and unapologetically violent.
What if that guy did this to your car?
What guy? The clown? You really think someone slashed my tires?
Well, he knows this is your car. He saw us getting into it earlier.
Hey, handsome!
Cut it out.
My friend wants your number.
Kill you.
What is it, Tara?
Dawn and I are sort of stranded. She has a flat tire and no spare, and I was kind of hoping you could pick us up. What the hell is wrong with you?
What, did you think he was gonna hack me up into little pieces or something?
In the latest episode of Rewind of the Living Dead, we're going to load up our garbage bag full of toys and stop at the local late-night pizzeria as we review the 2016 film Terrifier. Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick the Clown.
And Patrick, this week we are joined by a very, very special guest because we've done a lot of shows. We've had guests on this show. We've been lucky enough to have the guys from Talk to Me on. We just had Stephen Cognetti from the Hell House franchise on. And this week we are joined by my personal favorite creator on all of TikTok, a person that made me actually start a TikTok channel with horror stuff. You know her as Horror Chronicles. We also know her by Sydney, and she is also the host of the Hello Sydney podcast, or should I say, hello, Sydney. Sydney, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us to review a movie I know you love as well, Terrifier.
Favorites. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So before we get started, let me ask, because I discovered you just through TikTok. That's how I discovered your stuff. How long have you been doing TikTok and horror creation on there? Because I freaking love your channel.
Well, I appreciate that. It's only been about 2 years, and it's funny because I actually kind of accidentally started this. So I had always been so anti-TikTok. I'm like, this is lame. This is all the kids are on it. I was so pro Vine, bring back Vine. And then one of my friends was like, all you do is watch horror movies and none of us watch them. So you don't talk to anybody about them. Why don't you just make a TikTok? And I was like, you know what? Maybe that's not such a terrible idea. And then here we are 2 years later with almost 500,000 followers. Accidentally became a horror creator.
And the whole reason I'm on TikTok is because Damon says you have to check out Horror Chronicles. She's great.
Yeah.
And now I'm on TikTok, and now I'm on there. You've created monsters, Sydney.
It's amazing, though. It's amazing. And it's
great.
it's like a black hole. It just sucks you in.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, like I said, I was. That's my girlfriend was the same way. She's like, "You got to get on TikTok." I was like, "No, I'm not going to get on. I'm already on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I don't need another social media channel." And then one night, I was laying on the couch. She's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Nothing." I'm like scrolling through TikTok. I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So I'm addicted. So yeah, I'm definitely the same way. Now, you also, as I mentioned, you started your own podcast. Which, by the way, when we started our podcast, Patrick and I, this is about 4 years ago. Patrick and I were like, how long did we spend trying to come up with a title for our podcast? It took us weeks. We were trying to come up with something creative that wasn't already taken. You have the perfect podcast name.
I'm very fortunate for that. I kind of just like, especially being such a big Scream fan, like it's the perfect opportunity. It would be completely a missed opportunity if I didn't do it. So it worked out.
How is the podcasting experience been so far? I know you're like 3 episodes deep. You just did your Cursed Films episode. How are you liking the podcast? It's obviously much longer form, so a lot more talking. So have you enjoyed it?
So far, so good. I feel like my editing is like trash, but I remember when I first started TikTok, my editing was trash. So, we'll get there. It's an adjustment. It's definitely like I have a newfound respect for people like in the industry who do this because I'm like, this is difficult. Like this actually is very time consuming.
It is. Yeah, we both have regular jobs. I'm sure you have your own work that
Yeah.
you do outside of this, and so it is a labor of love. But are you somebody who was into horror like right from the beginning? We started horror at like 6, 7, 8 years old, maybe a little too young to be honest. What about you?
Sure. I always say I've been watching horror since I came out of the womb. Like I remember like as a kid, my family would be like, let's go to Blockbuster and pick out a movie. And it'd be like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I was 4 years old. Like,
Oh,
and that was
that's
just,
great.
I didn't even know until I was older that that wasn't like a normal thing that kids do. I
There's
had no
nothing
idea.
normal about us horror people, is there?
Nope.
We are definitely a unique community, but we are a community. And this week, so part of the reason why, like, we've wanted to have you on for a while, but we were going to do a giveaway, which I'll tell about later. I had some extra Terrifier 3 posters that I got from the movie theater when they had the re-release of Terrifier 2. Got some extras. We're going to be giving those away later in the show, and I'll give you the details on how to get those. But we wanted to have you on for a while. But I know, actually, what? I think one of my earliest introductions to you was when you talked about Terrifier 2, and that really blew up. And I remember seeing that. And to be honest with you, like, I was not familiar with Terrifier before Terrifier 2 came out. I had really not very little existence, and then the word of mouth started growing, the buzz started growing. And again, being very honest, I saw your video reviewing it, and I remember I think it's actually where I told Patrick that I'd been introduced to your TikTok channel. I was like, I feel like we got to review this Terrifier 2 movie. Like, it's really blowing up and it's going up, but I had to watch Terrifier 1 first. So that's kind of my introduction. Like, were you a Terrifier fan before Terrifier 2, or how did you get introduced to it?
Yeah, I honestly don't remember how I heard about Terrifier. I couldn't tell you, but I did watch it like when it came out, I think, which was like 2016. I think I might have even watched All Hallows Eve even before that. I again have no idea how I stumbled across it, but the first time I watched it, I was like completely enamored. I'm like, who is this Art the Clown? I need more of this guy. This is like the most gruesome villain. I fell in love with it.
2016. So we're talking about, I mean, or somewhere at least in those parts. So that's the kind of hardcore horror fan we're dealing with here, folks. Because my experience was I got on Clubhouse when that was a thing back in 2020 during the pandemic. And I became friends with Steve Barton, who's one of the producers on Terrifier 2. And he kept talking about, we're getting ready to release Terrifier 2, Terrifier 2. And I go, the hell's Terrifier 1? Like, I've never heard of it. Like, I just hadn't heard of it. And so I finally sought it out before Terrifier 2 came out. And I was like, oh, like, here we go. This is a whole other thing. And I mean, we might as well start talking about the movie here. Terrifier is Damien Leone's like minimalist little masterpiece on gore. And when I say minimalist, I mean, we talk all the time, we joke all the time on this podcast about how little plot there is in the Friday the 13th movies. Terrifier goes, plot? What plot? You need blood, you need guts, you need gore, you need art. He delivers it, and that's the amazing thing is for 90 minutes, you never don't get it. There's never downtime in 90 minutes where you're not either getting some art, getting some of our lead characters, or getting some serious gore. Like, I mean, what more can we ask for, folks?
Yeah, for sure. There's like no character development in it. Like it just opens with this like incredibly gruesome scene of the interviewer getting killed, and then it's just absolute chaos from start to finish. I love it.
It's weird too because like on this show, like I'm always the plot guy. I'm the story guy. I kind of pick apart the story, and I always talk about like I love a good story, but some movies you can't succeed at making a good horror movie that doesn't have a story. And Terrifier is a good example of that, where what we really want out of this film, what Damien Leone was really doing, was more or less auditioning himself as a special effects artist. And like we get like right out of the gate, the opening scene, you know, with the television, the interview, and then you get introduced to Art the Clown. And we got to be honest here, like when you think about iconic horror figures, you see some of the masks in my background. Like when you can design a character that has such a unique look to it, and it's a slasher, immediately you're going to catch hold of it because and I'm like I say many times on the show, slasher is my favorite genre of horror film. Art immediately catches your attention, and from there, like as soon as you meet him and as soon as you get introduced to these poor two souls who happen to cross paths with him on this lonely night, it's just mayhem from then on out. There's no stop. It's just an adrenaline rush of gore and blood and guts and craziness. But it's weird because normally I'm the guy. It's like I gotta have a story. I gotta have a good plot. I need a good, a character development's important to me, and it really is. But I don't need it with Terrifier. I understand what Terrifier is trying to do, and in my opinion, Damien Leone excelled at what he was trying. He wasn't trying to give me. He wasn't trying to give me Hereditary. He wasn't trying to give me a super deep horror film.
Yeah, nobody watches Terrifier for the plot. And I would take this over any of that elevated horror all day.
Yeah, we reject the term elevated horror here. Like it's like horror is horror. Some of it it has a better budget than others, but it's all horror and it's all good and yeah, artsy. And I love artsy, by the way. I am the artsy fartsy guy in the group. But truth be told, like I can do artsy fartsy and I can do Art the Clown. Like I can do both kinds of art.
You have range.
Yeah, I do. I have range. Thank you. I gotta ask, because this was something that struck me on. This is about, I'd say, my third viewing of Terrifier. And something got me this time around because obviously art is so iconic, just as like Damon was saying, like this iconic imagery. I gotta ask, is Art hot? Is he kind of sexy, like a little bit?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There's something about him that I can't immediately say no, and I think that speaks more to me than it does to anyone else.
Hey, I'm the one who asked the question because I'm watching it and I'm going like, I think he's a little bit charming.
I feel like, because you know how people like really sexualize Ghostface nowadays, like
Right.
I feel like eventually, it probably not so distant future, the same thing's going to happen with Art. I could absolutely see that happening if it isn't already. Honestly,
It's probably happening somewhere.
It probably is. I'm just not on that side of TikTok yet, but we'll get there.
What's crazy about it? So what's funny is, so again, I was the latest of our group to arrive to Terrifier, and again because I was introduced to Terrifier 2 through your video, Sydney. So what I discovered, once I became a fan, as I got my Art the Clown mask sitting behind me. Obviously, I became pretty obsessed with this franchise. It was in my top 5 horror films of 2022, and I went back and saw the re-release a few weeks ago just because I loved the movie. That being said, what I discovered more recently was, because I went back and rewatched the original Terrifier short and All Hallows Eve, which I had not been familiar with before seeing Terrifier and Terrifier 2, there was a different actor playing Art the Clown. Mike Gianelli was the guy's name, and I did some research, and last night I went on his Instagram page just kind of like, basically stalking him just because I was curious. And I discovered like a year ago it wasn't the original Art the Clown, but then I didn't realize until more recently that David Howard Thornton, who is iconically Art the Clown now, he didn't appear until Terrifier, like the actual film. Like that's his first appearance. I was like, that's wild because the look is so unique and it's been basically the same look the entire time. But I was like, it's so wild that like Art the Clown has become such an iconic version of horror and a symbol of horror in this day and age. Yet somehow it's actually a different actor playing the role than it was the guy who actually originated it.
And it's almost kind of like a Jason type thing, right? Where like because they're a masked character, you can't really tell that somebody different's underneath it. But like once you become a more seasoned fan of the franchise, like you know which Jasons are Kane Hodder, right? Like we know that. But like and like it's the same thing. Like I feel like eventually if somebody else were to play Art now after, we would know it was somebody different.
And then David Howard Thornton has a background in miming, I guess. And so I
Yeah.
think that makes a huge difference. Like it is you're totally right. It's totally the Kane Hodder thing where it's like his body language is going to tell me that it's Art the Clown. And I have a feeling too, like why would he let go of the character at this point? Like until his body tells him to stop.
I don't think Damien would let him let go of the character.
No, it doesn't seem that way.
Yeah, it's kind of wild too because like I went back and watched All Hallows Eve, and it's certainly not bad, like by any stretch of the imagination, but I do notice differences in the and it's so weird to say differences in a performance where a guy's a silent killing machine. But I do notice differences, like when I watched Terrifier last night, and then I've seen Terrifier 2 like 6 times. I've seen Terrifier like 3 times. I'll admit it. I've seen Terrifier 2 way more. But when I see the mannerisms that are done in Terrifier versus the mannerisms in All Hallows Eve and Terrifier 2, you really do start to recognize the David Howard Thornton of it all. Like you see how he took the character in the first film, had fun with it, made it his own, and then just took it to another level in Terrifier 2. But you wouldn't think you'd notice that many differences between, like, again, it's a silent, you know, in a lot of ways faceless. Like it's got a face, but obviously it's not, you know, it's made up and things like that. But yeah, it's weird. Like you notice a difference in the performance when you see Art the Clown in All Hallows Eve. Even though he looks basically the same, it's much different when you see Terrifier.
Yeah, totally. And I think that speaks a lot on David Howard Thornton's acting ability. Because like to be able to convey that much like emotion through body language and facial expressions is just so amazing to me.
Have you met David Howard Thornton? I assume you probably have at some point.
I haven't met him directly. I was at a horror con in Connecticut a few months back where I was like really up close to he and Damien because they were on like a horror panel as well as the girl who plays Sienna. But he and I are mutuals on Instagram, so
Yeah,
I'll meet him eventually, I'm sure. Hopefully.
yeah, so I met him at the horror convention I just went to in Lexington a couple months ago, and the whole Terrifier cast was there, and I got to meet Damien for the first time. I met Lauren Lavera, who you mentioned, and I met David Howard Thornton. It's so funny. I mean, listen, this is like when I met Robert England. I'll admit I was, you know, probably shaking and too nervous to even think about what he looked like, but there's like an aura, even though without the makeup on, there's like an aura of Freddy about him. Like you're just like, I'm in the presence of Freddy Krueger. When I met David Howard Thornton, I was like, this dude is the most unassuming, like, and I mean this, I'm not saying this like, I'm certainly not, but like, he's just like a normal, like kind of nerdy dude. Like he's just, like, he does not embody that character when you meet him.
Yeah, no, I feel totally the same way. Like again, like I didn't meet him directly, but just seeing him in person, I'm like, wow, this is just like a typical like goofy looking dude. Like not in a bad way, but you can't imagine him being this like crazed killer putting on this incredible performance.
And I'm sitting back here totally jealous because there's no horror conventions on the West Coast. There's like a few, but they don't even necessarily happen every year.
That's so weird.
It is weird.
LA especially, like
yeah, and I think LA is now going to start having like a regular horror con. Like I think I forget what it's called, but it's been here for at least the last 2 years straight. But I got to go and the only like horror icon I mean, he's an icon because he's in an iconic movie, but he was not an iconic Jason, which is Ken Kersinger, who played Jason in Freddy versus Jason. That is not a regular looking dude. That is a big ass dude. Because when you play Jason, you gotta have a real physical presence. But yeah, guys like David Howard Thornton and even Robert Englund to some extent would fade in the background if you didn't know who they were. Everybody knows Robert Englund, but it's crazy how these guys can just totally transform. And then there's this whole aspect of like how we're talking about how the makeup. Damien Leone had to redo the makeup but make it the same, but on a totally different face. So like there's that whole aspect of Damien's craftsmanship as an effects artist to go, oh, I have a whole new face that is essentially just needs, like, I need to build Art the Clown around a whole new face when he hired David, and he pulled it off. Like there's very little difference between the old one and the new one other than the acting.
Yeah, it's really impressive, really.
I'm curious, like, because with Art the Clown, so like, yeah, and to that real quick, I want to say, like, when I saw All Hallows Eve, the poster for All Hallows Eve, that's one of the creepiest images of Art, and I didn't know it till later that it wasn't David Howard Thornton. One of the things I always like to talk about in this show, and listen, I know we all kind of agree here, like, there's not a lot of plot to Terrifier, but we all like Terrifier. I'm always curious, and this is a subject Patrick and I talk about a lot, but it helps a lot that we have a woman's perspective now, Sydney. When I watch the characters in this movie, the two girls who we meet at the beginning of the movie, going to their car and see Art the Clown, she's a little drunk, she can't drive, they decide to go get some pizza to kind of sober up and whatever. One thing I always mock horror characters for, which I love it because it's horror, but I'm always like, people make really bad, dumb decisions in horror movies. And sometimes it takes me out of the film because, like, when they make bad decisions, you're like, you would never do that. Like, you would never just, like, willingly go into that house or what, you know that. But, like, the girls in this movie, the two girls, like, by the way, like, obviously where they filmed this at, like, I don't know where they were hanging out at, that they were in that part of the world, like, in that corner of the world, going to their car that night. But, like, immediately, like, I'm just like, these girls are all making the worst. Like when the one girl's like, I need to go to the bathroom, and she goes to the sketchy ass building, and the guy's like, yeah, we're getting ready to bomb it for rats, and she's like, no problem, I'll go in this like sketch. I'm like, these are the worst decisions you could ever make as a character.
It's so bad, really. Especially like Dawn infuriates me in this movie. Like, imagine seeing a guy who looks like Art the Clown and just going up to him and sitting on his lap, just like it's no big deal. At least Tara was kind of like skeptical of him, you know? Like, again, she wasn't the smartest either, but Dawn was just a complete like ditz the whole time. I'm like, girl, come on.
I almost put in a category called Girl Why.
Girl,
Like,
yeah, for real.
like, because there were so many moments, and I was watching it with my wife who had never seen Terrifier before, and she loves to just be like, why are these characters doing this? She was like, oh my God, these women these women want to be killed.
Seriously, it's like, come on, give us a little more credit than that.
But like, it's one thing. It's one thing to be standing by your car and see a creep. Like, and it's again, it's not like Art looks like a normal clown. Like, he already looks crazy to begin with, and you kind of toy with that. But then he shows up in the pizza parlor, and you go over and sit on his lap and take a selfie. I'm just like, are you just asking for the hacksaw? Like, what are you doing here? Like, this is the worst. And as you said, Tara makes, like, at least she's like cautious, but then she goes in the sketchy ass building. She's like, I was like, hold it. Just hold it. Just hold it. You do not need to pee that bad.
I would rather pee myself than go into this sketchy ass building with this sketchy ass maintenance worker. And then she runs into the homeless woman and just like moves right along as if it's no big deal.
And my wife was like, that maintenance worker is sketchier than Art. Like, I'm more sketched out. Like her like woman antenna went up, and she was like, I wouldn't be around that guy.
No, totally agree. And there is this one scene where she first goes in, and you know how hard does like the camera angles and stuff, and they kind of like zoom in on him. And I remember the first time watching this being like, is he going to be the killer now? Like, this doesn't, I thought it was the clown.
It's kind of funny too, because one thing that I picked up on this rewatch, and like I said, I think this is my third time rewatching it all the way through. I always have this image of Art in my head of like this maniacal, creepy smile that he always has on his face that's even crazier. But he actually does a lot of like kind of sour looks in this movie, more than Terrifier 2. Like Terrifier 2, he's much more, eyes wide open, that gleaming kind of creepy smile he has. There's like when he's sitting in that pizza booth across from them, and then when she goes over and sits with him, he looks so like he literally looks like he's about to tear them apart. Like he's not like I think he's creepier when he's the smiling guy, because it's almost like disconcerting that this guy's just laughing and enjoying himself so much when he's murdering you. But in that moment, like, he's got this really crazed look in his eye, and he just looks like he looks pissed off. And I kind of forgot how much he looked like that in this movie. And I was like, why would you go anywhere near this dude? Like, at least the pizza guys had the right idea, kicking him out. Well, after what he did to the bathroom, but like, at least they're a little sketchy about it. Like the one girl's just like, oh, it's fine. I'll go sit on his lap. It's no big deal.
Like, I say that every time I talk about Terrifier, just because again, that speaks to David Howard Thornton's acting ability because his whole face changes. Like he'll be smiling and then all of a sudden he stops smiling, but like there's something about his eyes, like his eyes switch. And it's absolutely so disturbing. And again, to see that and to just go over and sit on this guy's lap, I can't. Give her the hacksaw.
So okay, yeah, it's fun, yeah, because I said that we are very much to Patrick's point. I was watching this last night, and my girlfriend's walking around the apartment doing stuff with our dogs and stuff, and then she goes, "Is there a plot to this movie?" And it's like, "Not really." I was like, "That's not really the point of this movie." So let's get to the point of this movie, which is the gore, which is the killing, which is what, again, Patrick, you are the biggest Friday the 13th fan, which speaks to why you should enjoy Terrifier, because they do share a lot of DNA of like, how many cool different ways can Jason kill people? How many cool different ways can Art the Clown kill people?
And what I love too is that what Damien Leone did here was, Jason, he's like a brute. He kills you quick, fast. He attacks you basically. Like Freddy, he messes with you. He's got his dream template. Art, he sort of like tortures you. Like he doesn't just want to kill you. He absolutely wants to torture you for the longest amount of time possible. You get a lot of that in Terrifier 2. You really, like, he kills people like 3 times over in Terrifier 2. But this was like the testing ground for that. And I really respect what Damien Leone did there. Like, it feels very intentional that Art the Clown does not just kill you. No one just gets a knife in the gut. No one just, if he shoots you with a gun, which is another unique thing about Art, he shoots you to wound you so he can kill you more. Like, it's such a unique take.
He puts on a show, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of that clown aspect. It's like, I'm giving you the show. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that's what makes the Terrifier series incredibly unique, is how he kills, because he wants to fuck with you for a very long time. You're not going quickly into that good night.
No, absolutely not. And like the thing I remember going into Terrifier 2, I was like, how are they going to top Terrifier 1? And then they did. And now I'm like, I'm fucking scared for Terrifier 3. Like, how are they going to top that bedroom scene in Terrifier 2? But he will. He'll find a way.
Yeah, he will.
So I want to get everyone's initial reaction, because the one scene that we all know that is the most iconic in Terrifier is the hacksaw scene. You get Tara tied up, Dawn, the big revelation, she's hung upside down naked. And I remember watching this the first time, and this was like, I think I watched like a week or two before I saw Terrifier 2. So it was like October of last year. It wasn't that long ago. And I said, then I watched it, and I didn't know what to expect, because again, I wasn't familiar with the movie. And then I kind of figured that out pretty early on, what this film was going to be, and I just appreciated it for that. But then when they got to the hacksaw scene, like when you get to a moment in a film with a guy like me who's been watching horror my entire life, and I feel like I've seen most everything. Like, I've seen Martyrs, and Martyrs is a film that I enjoy, but I always say I'll never watch again. Like, I'm like, I've seen it once, that's enough. That traumatized me enough to see it one time. When a movie can top that in terms of gore and insanity, I'm like, that's a special treat. So I just remember watching it being like, is he really chopping this woman in half with a hacksaw? And it's not quick. Like, it's drawn out, and you hear Tara in the background screaming and all this. Like, I was just shocked, because it seemed like horror didn't go that far anymore. Like, it didn't seem like there's certain, and usually when it goes that far, it's like the French extremism. Like, in America, you didn't see that. So I got asked, what was your initial reaction when you first saw the hacksaw scene?
So I'll never forget this, because when I was about like 20, 21 years old, I went to this museum in New York, and it was a medieval torture museum. And I saw that technique. And it's always stuck in my brain, because I was like, God, this is such a sadistic way to kill somebody, because you don't really get into any vital organs until you're like, mid body. So they just got to feel all that. And I never forgot that. And then when I saw this movie, and I saw her hanging upside down, I was like, there's no way. I was like, there's no way they're about to do this. And then they did. And my jaw was to the fucking floor. And I'm pretty sure I literally rewinded it and watched it again because I was like, I can't believe that actually just happened. Like I had never seen that done before. I was so shook, but I was like so happy. I'm like, this is so creative. I'm so happy that somebody used this in a movie because it seems like an opportunity missed that nobody's done it before.
And that's exactly, I'm exactly right there with you, because I went, they had the Museum of Torture here in San Diego for like the longest time. And I remember going and I was like reading intently everything that was happening on every one of the displays. And I remember that one. And I just remember this feeling coming over my body going like, oh, that's awful. Like what this is. And then I see it in this movie and I go, oh, they're going to do it with a rusty old hacksaw, with a rusty old pipe saw. And I was like, oh, but they'll like cut away because that's what horror films do. And then when they don't cut away and you watch the intricate Damien Leone like gore on full display, I was like, oh, he's not fucking around. He wants people to know he's here. Like I'm here. I'm going to go farther than anybody else. And it's going to look good too. Like it's actually going to look realistic, because you could definitely go down those roads. Like we talked about Trauma a little bit before the podcast. Trauma, like it looks fake, it looks silly, and that's kind of part of the fun. This was like, no, I wanted to look as real as I could possibly make it look, and it's terrifying. Like Terrifier, right? It's right there in the title, and you just go, holy shit! And like it was weird for me to go. I knew right in that instant, even though this was years after Terrifier had come out, this is like 2020, 2021, I go, oh, he's here to stay. He's going nowhere because he went this hard.
Yeah, he's here to make a statement for sure.
Totally.
Well, it's also like partly I'm not like a gore fiend. Like I like gore, but I don't need gore. Like there's lots of good movies that have no real gore and they can be great movies. I mean, until I know you're a big Scream fan, Sid, like I'm a huge Scream fan as well. Like honestly, like obviously you get the Casey Becker thing in the opening film, but like Scream 6 really went brutal. Like they really turned that into a really brutal version of Scream, which was much different than the other films, but I don't need it. Like if you could make a good movie without gore, I'm totally fine with that. But one thing that does piss me off sometimes with horror, and I've talked about this on the podcast, like I have a lot of love. It's a much maligned horror film, but I have a lot of love for Halloween H2O. I really like Halloween H2O. But probably one of my biggest complaints is the cutaways for the kills. Like, I don't need you to show me all the gore, but like it seems like every great kill minus like one, they cut away when Michael Myers is actually killing someone. It bugs me because that's just not how you do a Michael Myers movie. I like everything else about that movie with that one exception. Damon Leone's like, I'm going to give you what I'm here to show you, which is the gore. Like, that's what I'm here to show my work as a special effects artist. Here is a hacksaw literally chopping a woman in half. And probably what's even more disturbing about that scene isn't just the hacksaw, it's the aftermath, because you keep seeing it. Like they revisit that room a couple more times where you see her split in half. It's wild.
Yeah, it never goes away. And even when like Tara has to run by her, you're like, oh my God, this is horrific. Why?
And are you big on gore yourself, Sid?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why. I don't need it, but I do enjoy it very much. So that's why, like, this is a perfect movie for me. Like, the Terrifier movies are so perfect for me. I love it.
So I want to throw out, obviously, again, we're not, there's not a ton of deep plot to get into with this movie, but I do have one question, and kind of I want to throw it out to everybody in like a kind of a curiosity how you feel about this, because I remembered it watching them. I knew it happened, but I kind of forgot about it a little bit. How do we feel about Art the Clown using guns? Because I'm not turning this into like a gun debate conversation. I'm just like, he's so like when you open the trash bag full of fun and he can turn, like the leather scissor whip. And then you think about the bat with all the different implements stabbed into it in Terrifier 2. And you think about all the different, I kind of forgot when he shot Tara in this movie. I was like, oh yeah, that's how he does it. I kind of forgot for a second. And obviously in the second one, he uses the shotgun on the mom. So it's not like, it's not like he hasn't been consistent with using firearms. But in that moment when I rewatched it last night, I was kind of like, man, it seems a little weird and almost out of character for Art to use a gun. Am I wrong in thinking that? Because I was just watching it last night thinking, this is kind of weird.
So I somewhat agree, but then thinking about it, like, first of all, he's diverse, inclusive king, he doesn't discriminate against weapons. Second, I think the reason that I don't mind it with the Tara scene at least was because I think Tara was putting up a good fight. And I think he was just so fed up because then when he comes back, so he shoots her like initially in the face, right? But she's still alive. Obviously, she's struggling. He leaves, he comes back, he shoots her again. And then he shoots her like 6 more times. And like his face, again, it's just that face of just pure rage. There's no smile on him at this point. Those eyes are just black. And I think he's just so angry at this point that she put up a fight that he just wants to get rid of her in the easiest way possible.
And I'm with you. I think he's like, it's like, okay, if everything else doesn't kill you, this will. I know this will. And it's really weird because I didn't realize until basically the end of this movie, and this movie's plenty old, so we're all the way in spoilers, is that he doesn't die. That was like you don't get that sense until the very end. You're like, oh, he can't die, and it turns out I believe Damien Leone calls him like he's like a killing demon or like a torture demon or something. I don't know the exact term. Do you? I don't. Does anyone know that?
I can't remember. I've heard this. I've heard Damien.
Yeah, like he's some sort of demon who just gets off on like killing and maiming people as best he can. So for Art, it's like, well, anything that's available, whatever's available to me. And it's interesting, and that he even though he's a demon and he can't die, it's not like he's super strong, not like a Jason. He's not ethereal like Freddy. He doesn't have, he's almost a little bit more like Ghostface. Like you can beat him up. You can mess with him. Like he just won't die. He's kind of like, I guess, would Deadpool be that? Damon, you're the comic book guys. Deadpool, like he just won't die. You can do a lot to him, right?
Yeah, he's indestructible and he just heals. Like he just heals. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's what Art the Clown is. So he's like, like, okay, great. I'm really good at torturing and killing people, but I'm not like the strongest. I'm not the toughest. Like you could probably beat me up. So yeah, I'll use whatever's available.
Yeah. He definitely gets Zach beat more than a couple times. So
yeah.
Well, it's funny because I guess it's not really a complaint, just more like here's my twisted soul speaking here. I just like Art's creativity. I like as I mentioned, the whip with the scissors on the end. When you talk about the board with the implements nailed in, and we talked about this when we did our Terrifier 2 review. The beginning of the movie, you see him chopping all these things in that piece of wood, and you're like, well, he's got to use it at some point. And sure enough, towards the end of the movie, when he's attacking Sienna and stuff, he uses it. But like, I like the creativity. So like, when he uses a gun, I'm just kind of like, oh man, like, couldn't you have stabbed her? Couldn't you have done something weird with like a light bulb or something? I don't know. Isn't there another weapon around? But like he does, and obviously the gun plays a part later in the film when the cops finally show up and he shoots himself, which is also, intricate to his comeback and things like that. But yeah, it was weird. Like when I watched it this time, I guess this speaks to how fucked up I am. But I was like, man, I want to see him kill her in a different way.
I have a feeling Damien probably won't use a gun in the future though, because I'm sure he's probably heard that from people before. Like, come on, you give us such great kills. Like, don't be lazy with it.
Yeah.
Or he's going to use the gun in a way we've never thought of before, which I'm like, kind of crossing my fingers, like let's see what you can do with that. My one other thing that stood out on this viewing, like so much more stood out to me this time around because we were going to talk about it for the podcast. I forgot just how long of the movie happens without Tara. Now Tara's played by the great Jenna Cannell, who we love. We call her goth Sydney Prescott on this podcast. We love her. They're a wonderful actor. I forgot that Tara, the character, dies pretty much at the halfway point, and then her sister Victoria becomes the final girl, and is almost has no dialogue. Like,
it's very unexpected.
It really is. So like, I'm just kind of, I want to gauge the room on this. Like this time around, it really hit me. I was like, wow. Actually, there's two final girls. One doesn't make it, and then
Yeah.
one has her ending, and then one continues on with almost no dialogue.
That to me was almost like Damien pulling a Psycho. Like people went into watching Psycho thinking that Janet Leigh's
Janet Leigh.
character survive, and it's the same thing. They kill her off mid-movie. Nobody was expecting that, and I feel like it was like definitely for the shock factor, because we all thought that Tara was going to be the final girl, and then to see her be killed off like that mid-movie, it was like, okay, well, like, is anybody going to survive this? This means all bets are off.
Yeah, and also, like, the other thing I like about this, because, again, I'm a slasher fan, and I love slasher movies, but if there's one thing we can all agree on with slasher movies is at some point, I mean, and this isn't a bad thing necessarily, but they do become a little predictable in terms of the ending, because you usually know someone's going to make it. Like, Sidney Prescott's going to get out alive, or Laurie Strode's going to make it out, or what, Nancy Thompson's going to wake up from her dream, whatever the case may be. That's how we earn the final girl trope. That's how that's how the final girl thing started. What I love about Terrifier is that it flips that on its head, because it is a slasher. At its heart, it's still a slasher film, but there's no survivors. Now, that changes in Terrifier 2, and of course, we're going to see what happens in Terrifier 3. We're going to talk about that a little later, but they're really, I mean, yes, technically Victoria survives, but she really doesn't when you realize what she becomes afterwards, and she's now played a role in both films. Like, she pops back up in Terrifier 2 as well. But it's kind of crazy, like, when you think about the slasher genre as a whole, that's the staple, a survivor. The bad guy dies and the heroine wins. And the fact that while Victoria makes it out alive, the ending is her getting her face eaten off by Art the Clown. So it's like she really doesn't make it.
She doesn't make it, and then at the same time, she's also now the villain, because the movie opens with her killing somebody. So it's like, okay, she made it, but now she's obviously not a human or a normal human anymore. So there's no point of her living.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Like, although we talked about, like, the lack of plot in this movie, I appreciate that one little avenue that he went down, that he didn't really give us a true final girl. Like, he kind of did, but not really, because again, she becomes a villain in her own right afterwards. So it's a nice twist on the genre that you feel, because I'll be honest, when I watched this the first time, I was like, oh, well, Tara's going to make it. She's going to survive this. And then when she gets killed and her sister shows up, I'm like, oh, okay, I agree. Like, Psycho, cool. You got you lost the character we thought was going to make it. Her sister's going to make it. Well, not so much. So again, you're not giving us a lot of plot, but that one little twist in the plot, the fact that we didn't actually get a final girl, really, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's a little different than what you would expect out of this film.
Yeah, I respect when, things kind of shock you like that, and it takes the typical horror trope and kind of turns it on its head, because again, that's how you shock your audience, and that's how I think you get people like really hooked. Because even going into Terrifier 2 now, I'm like, okay, Sienna, I think, is going to be the final girl, but she's probably going to end up dead too, based on the first one, and then she doesn't. So you don't really know what to expect out of this franchise.
Yeah, this franchise is really good at subverting your expectations, and I couldn't believe I could be more shocked at Terrifier 2 coming off of Terrifier 1. I was like, oh, they're going to continue to surprise me. That's really good.
Well, and also, I mean, listen, I've seen a lot of interviews with Damien Leone from this film, and then I've seen far more from Terrifier 2, but from my understanding, like, Terrifier was really a display of his special effects. Like, it wasn't meant to be a super deep, meaningful film. He was really showing off what he could do with practical effects, which I love practical effects. I mean, give me practical effects every day of the week and twice on Sunday before you give me any kind of CGI or any of that garbage. So I appreciate it. So really what this was almost like an audition to, like, hey, here's what I can do. And it was super impressive, and he wasn't trying to go beyond that. Now, Terrifier 2 introduces a lot more story, a lot more character development, things like that, which I appreciate, not that I'm sitting here trying to rate the films or anything, but, like, I'll fully admit I probably like Terrifier 2 better than Terrifier, because it did give us that little bit more, that character development. I really like Lauren Lavera's performance and things like that, but I can appreciate what Terrifier represents and what it was meant to be. And I also appreciate, in a weird way, that it doesn't try to be more than what it's be. It is what it is. It's a gory slasher film where nobody makes it out alive. I can kind of appreciate the simplicity of that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's about the promise of the premise, which I think what Damon and I talk about all the time on this podcast is like, did this film deliver on what it says it's going to do in trailer and promotional material? Well, you know, Damien has clearly like stamped himself as somebody who is going to give you hardcore gore, and he's not going to hold back, and he's going to go harder every single time. So is he delivering on that? Yeah, like big time. I know that no matter what is going to be put in front of us, we're going to get insane gore. And yeah, I'm a bit of a gore whore, so I'm fine with that.
And he just keeps one-upping himself. So
Yeah.
you just don't know what to expect.
Exactly. All right, let's get into some categories with this movie because there is a lot to get to. Even though it's light on plot, there's a lot to talk about in terms of categories. We kick things off each and every week on the show with best performance, and this is where we basically give who we think kind of stole the show here. So, Sid is our guest. You're going to be first up on all these categories. So I want to ask you first: when you look back at Terrifier, who gets your award for best performance?
For me, it's got to be David. It's got to be Art. I mean, Tara's great, and I definitely think she's a close second. But without David, and again, the fact that he could just like convey that much emotion and that much insanity without even speaking, it's so impressive to me. So he gets my vote for that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna back that one as well. David Howard Thornton gets my best performances. It's so bizarre how, like, one of the reasons my two favorite horror franchises are Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream. And a big part of why I think I love those movies so much is because both of the killers, Ghostface and Freddy, have personality. Like they kind of torment you before they kill you. And I appreciate that. Now, I understand just kind of like the blinding, rage of a Jason or a Michael Myers, but there's something about a killer who kind of taunts you first and then kills you that I appreciate. I grew up, welcome to prime time, bitch. Like I loved that. And then of course, with like this Ghostface kind of the same way. Weirdly, the way that David Howard Thornton portrays Art the Clown, and he smiles and he kind of torments you and he kind of winks at you and nods at you and kind of tells you what's coming without ever saying a word, he's giving you the same kind of vibes. Like he's taunting and tormenting his prey in the same way that a Freddy or a Ghostface would, but he just doesn't do it with a telephone or in your dreams. It's kind of bizarre how well he pulls that off, and I think that speaks to why this performance is so good. And all I can say for David Howard Thornton is like I know he's done other stuff. I've seen him in other stuff. I hope he gets more speaking roles because he's so good at not speaking. I'd be like, man, if this guy could pull off speaking, like certainly handing out some awards, but it's really weird how much he can pull off this performance without really saying anything. Yet you get, at least in my opinion, you get a similar vibe to the killers who are tormenting you.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Patrick, what about you? Who do you have for best performance?
Oh, what were you going to say there, Sid?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I remember reading about David Howard Thornton that his dream role is to play the Joker.
Yeah, that's right. He might have his shot still. There could be plenty more DC coming. So
that's my favorite Terrifier shirt that I didn't wear today is the one that's modeled after the Joker with him with his hands up on his head looking all maniacal, because I love that there's a same shirt from a Joker, so it would work out well. He would definitely pull that off. If anyone could pull it off, David Howard Thornton could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And this was almost a shutout. I was very ready to say David Howard Thornton until on this rewatch I realized that Jenna Cannell really gives us all the hell that you can give when she finally comes face to face with Art. When Art finally starts chasing her down and attacking her, tying her up, she's having to watch her friend get sawed in half, she's getting cut up, she's getting shot up. This time around, I didn't realize just how much Tara was giving us, and that comes from Jenna Cannell's great performance. So I had to give this one to Jenna.
Well, let me just throw this out there, and this is not a knock on Victoria, who gets introduced to us later. Victoria spends the majority of her, once we meet her and she gets to that building to look for her sister, she spends the majority of the last, 30, 40 minutes of this movie running from Art the Clown. What I appreciate about Tara, she fought back. Like she's taunting. Like when she hit him with that board, and he's laying there right before he shoots her. She's like, get up. Like she's like, get up, bitch. Like she's like, get up. And like she fought him. Like she was not. Of course, she was running at certain points too, but she fought back. Whereas Victoria just was fleeing. Now, I certainly understand running away from Art the Clown, but I appreciate that performance from Jenna Cannell that she's like, at moments, she's just like, fuck this. I'm going to hit this guy with a board. I'm going to try to fight back. It backfires spectacularly, but at least she tries.
Yeah. And then she deserved to live for that. Like, and again, like you think she's gonna, because you're like, damn, Final Girl, she's putting up such a good fight. And then, nope.
Yeah. It is a great subversion of expectation, right? Like she's fighting back so hard, but she doesn't win. Like that's good.
And I think that goes not to reiterate what I said earlier. That's like when he shoots her, I'm just like, damn it. Like she was putting up a good fight. Like she was actually getting the better of Art in that moment. And you're just like, but I guess, you're a horror character. You're like, you can't let that happen. So here's a gun. I'm just going to blow you away. But yeah, she was actually putting up a good fight. And like Jenna Cannell, and actually, obviously everyone in this film has gone on to do other things, but Jenna's gone on to do a lot of stuff. Like she was in Renfield last year when she popped up in Renfield, I was like, hey, I know her from Terrifier.
I actually just watched that. It's funny you say that. I just watched that movie like a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I was like, holy shit, I know her.
Yeah. And she has the best line in Renfield. She's like, well, fuck Carol, I guess. Like, I fucking love that.
That was a great movie.
That's so good. So good. All right, let's talk about, this is a category that Patrick created. Do you want to introduce this one, Patrick, with best artitude?
Yeah. So normally we would do in this place like favorite character, but truth be told, like there's not a ton of characters in this movie. So I was like, oh, let's not try and make that one work. But there was a lot of artitude, which is what we've been talking about. David Howard Thornton's incredible performance as Art the Clown. But between the killing moments, he has all these little clown moments, all these little Art the Clown moments. And I dubbed them artitude. And Sid, why don't you give us your favorite artitude moment?
One of my personal favorites, and it's just because it's so silly. It's when they're in the pizzeria, and he goes and like gets the little plastic ring out of that thing, and he goes over to Tara and he puts it on her, and he tips his little tiny hat, and it's just like such a comedic and like perfectly timed moment. And again, like the hat is just it's just so ridiculous. That's honestly one of my favorite parts of the whole movie.
And that's exactly when I was like, is he kind of hot? He might be kind of hot.
Yeah, I would accept this ring.
That was definitely a good one. For me, so I went a different one in it because I was watching the movie trying to think like which one is the best one, and the one that actually made me laugh the most, which is so dumb, is the moment when I think it may have been Terra Victoria, I can't remember which one it is. They stab him in the foot with the spike, and he just turns and looks at them and just flips them off, and it just cracked me up because I was like, it was just so random. It reminded me, so one of my all-time favorite horror films, reminded me in the scene of The Devil's Rejects when Sid Haig is kind of taunting Bill Moseley's character. Bill Moseley, or no, it's Ken Foray is talking. He's like, "You still an asshole?" And Bill Moseley just goes. It just reminded me of that, like where she stabs him in the foot, and since he can't say like "ow" or scream at her like "what the fuck are you doing," he's just like flips her off.
That's a good one, yeah.
My best artitude came with excuse me, when he takes a selfie with Dawn, because in the beginning and the pizzeria, she takes a selfie with him. He clearly doesn't want to take one. Well, when he's all done flaying her, splitting her completely down the middle, he comes in and takes a selfie with his new artwork. And he gives this face too that's sort of like, fucking hate selfies. Like, but like he wants to do it to kind of get back at her. And it's like, that's awfully petty of you, Art, but like I'm here for it.
It's like poetic almost.
Very poetic.
Now here's the question I have. I don't know why I'm just thinking this now because he takes it. That had, like, obviously we see the flash go off. Did someone really take that photo, and where is it right now? Like, did someone actually use a phone? Like, if Damien Leone actually had someone's phone to do that and use the flash and everything, where's that photo? I want to see if that photo exists.
Oh, that's got to be somewhere. Somebody has to have it.
If it's out there, I want it on a t-shirt.
Like, come on. Like, how is that? Because I was watching it last night. I was like, I never thought about that. I was like, I wonder what became of that picture. Like, it's in a phone. He took it with an actual phone. So, and I'm sure they did multiple takes. So someone's got to have it out there. Like, Damien Leone, where is this photo? We want this selfie.
Photo.
There's your horror convention panel question. Where is that selfie at? Because we know it exists.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. All right, let's talk about best scare, because this is ultimately a horror podcast and a horror show. This is a different film in terms of scare, because it's not a lot of tradition, not a lot of jump scares and things like that. But obviously, you can talk about the gore. You can talk about a lot of other things that are scary. So, Sid, I'll throw it to you. Of course, again, what was your best scare in Terrifier?
So for me, I would say it's the first time that Art and Tara come face to face in the building. So she's like coming up from the bathroom and he's just at the door and he's like posed and he's just like frozen with that shit-eating grin on his face. And he's like got a scalpel or something in his hand. And like it goes back and forth between him, Tara. And it seems like it goes on forever. And then he just starts chasing her. And that to me is like, I can't, because I put myself in Tara's shoes and I'm like, what do you do in that situation? Like, do you start running, or like obviously you're frozen? And that to me, that's the one.
He's standing in front of the door too, and when he's making the face and he's just like, kind of happy, whatever, and then he kind of jolts at her and then she takes off. It's almost like a Mexican standoff where like she can't run because he's blocking the door, but she's also just kind of like happy and staring at her. And then when he lunges at her, then she has to run, but they're only like 5 feet apart, 6 feet apart. So it's a really tense scene in that moment too.
And it's again like another one of those horror tropes, like people are always running up the stairs when they should be running out the door, but she can't run out the door. So now what do you do?
Sid, are you one of those people that do you get scared? Are you still somebody who gets scared at a horror movie?
Rarely.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely. So I wouldn't say this scene that like scared me, but I think like it is the most scary of the whole movie, just because again, like if I get more scared of movies where I can put myself in the character's shoes, be like, okay, what would I do here? So like if I had that man coming at me, I would shit my pants.
We'll talk about that soon. And my best scare, I was, because I'm like you, I don't get terribly scared at these things, and I don't consider this one a jump scare movie anyway. But my wife was there. She gets scared at everything. She's one of these ones that wriggles on the couch when anything happens. And by the way, she watches just as much horror as I do. Like at this point, she should be desensitized, but she's not. So I went off her best scare because it was so easy to just go, well, that scared her almost completely off the couch. And it was a moment where Tara was trying to get away. And I think there was that double door that was like kind of halfway open, and Art's hand like comes through and tries to grab her. And my wife just went, and like with her blanket went going and all that stuff. I was like, there it is. There's our best scare for Terrifier.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of funny because I kind of like, I was watching it and I was like, there aren't like traditional jump scares in this movie. So you're going to have to focus more on, just the actual killing or just those moments. And then it didn't get me like in terms of like it scared me. I kind of forgot it happened. So I was like, oh wow, that was a good one. Was when Tara is creeping around the cars trying to find Art. You see his shoes on the other side of the car, so she's trying to get away from him. And then just out of nowhere, he's there stabbing her in the leg with a scalpel. And I was like, I kind of forgot that happened in that moment where he starts stabbing her in the leg. And I was like, damn, that's right. And so like that one ended up being my best scare because I was like, even though I've seen this movie multiple times, when it happened this time, I was kind of like, oh shit. Like he just starts stabbing her and you just see his feet across the way from her. So I was like, that was actually a pretty effective one in terms of what they were going for, like with a more traditional jump scare, even though it wasn't really a jump scare.
And by the way, so there's so much what?
No, there's just so much that happens in this movie that like no matter how many times you watch it, I feel like there's always something that you forget about. You're like, oh, holy shit. Like, because it's just, again, from start to finish, just chaos.
And of the two of us, by the way, said Damon is the wriggler. All 6'3" of him is on the couch with the blanket, like jumping. No, I'm playing around. It's just great imagery. Like the thought of Damon getting scared at all makes me very giddy.
we always joke on this show because we'll talk about it later. Of course, anyone listening to the show knows our final category is always "Is it scary?" And we always say we have to grade on a scale because what scares us doesn't scare, or well, what scares us should terrify the regular audience. But like we have to remember that people like us who are way into horror, like it's like a comfort movie for us. It's not really scary. Like I don't watch, like I love scary movies, but it takes a lot to scare me. Like it takes a lot to really make me jolt in my seat. Like there's been movies I watch where my girlfriend is on the couch, she's jumping out of the chair, and I'm like, oh, that was cool. Like that's just the nature of the beast. Like when you watch this much horror, so we have to grade. I always say we grade on a scale. Like there's the hardcore audience, and then there's the regular people. We're not the regular people anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really something that's so true because like I fall asleep to horror movies every night and like all my friends are like, how do you live? Like I live by myself. They're like, how do you live alone? How do you do anything? I'm like, it's comforting to me. I can't not do it.
So what? I'm curious. So we're getting off subject a little bit with Terrifier. What was the last movie that scared you?
The last movie that scared me, one that I can pinpoint for sure that I've watched within the last couple of years that like absolutely terrified me was Hell House LLC.
That's a good
For
one.
sure.
And I think everybody in this on this podcast right now can agree. Like, because I didn't see Hell House LLC until he recommended it to me last year. Like, I had just totally missed it, and I was like, it was less like me being scared, but me just going, "Ooh, that's good." Like, that's actually what scary should be.
Yes, it genuinely scared the shit out of me. I can't even lie about it. I like actually slept with my lights on that night, and I haven't done that since I was like maybe 16 years old and watched Grave Encounters. Like that movie really scared the shit out of me. But now I watch it all the time.
Yeah, now it's a great watch.
No, it is.
Yeah.
We had Stephen Cognetti, the director, on. We interviewed him a couple weeks ago, actually, as we reviewed Hell House LLC, and I watched it. I'm not saying this because you're on the show's hit. I'm pretty sure I watched it based upon a recommendation from you. I think that's how I did. And I watched it, and it was one of the rare times where, like, when it was over, I had to turn the lights on. I was like, fuck this. Like, this is when the clown turns his face at you the first time and you don't see it coming. I told Stephen Cognetti, we had him on the show, I was like, I don't get scared by much. That scared the shit out of me. And that movie is legitimately terrifying. And yeah, like not to get off subject, but like that's one that got me too. I was like, it's so weird and it's so simple. But yeah, that one scared the piss out of me too.
Very effective. Very effective.
So now let's move on to our next category and let's talk about, this is a big one because this is the entire movie, which is best gore / best kill. Sid, there's a lot to choose from here, of course. And I rewatching it, like, obviously a lot of people die, and everyone talks about the hacksaw scene. Now, that's the famous one we all know, and I have zero problem if you pick the hacksaw scene. But there's actually a lot of really cool gore and really cool kills in this movie. So what was your personal favorite in the kill / gore category?
So my favorite, obviously, is the hacksaw scene, and we all know about that one. But honorable mention for me is the opening kill, actually, of I forget her name, but the interviewer, because the way that she just like destroys, because the whole thing again is very poetic to me. How she's talking to her boyfriend, and she's like, "If I ever look like that, like please make sure that you kill me or whatever." And then this lady comes out and makes her look like that, like tears her face off, and she's got like the googly eye, like that. That's a great kill.
Patrick, what about you?
Well, I did put on mine the split down the middle because it is the iconic one. I think it's, if you say Terrifier, I think everybody's brain goes to that. But I do have honorable mention, and it's a really weird one. And it happens like, I think it's right before that because he has to tranquilize Tara. And this is such a weird, goofy thing. But to me, this is how my brain works. This is how my scary things that freak me out. He hits her with like the dirtiest syringe, and it grossed me out because I was like, it's so dirty. Like just something about that like really, really, really bugged me. Like, oh, the splitting the person in half, bravo. Very good. Very excellent stuff. Dirty needles, you sick fuck. Damien Leone, I will never talk to you with your dirty needles. It's disgusting.
So now for me, obviously, okay, let's just, the hacksaw is the scene. We all know it's the scene. Like, that is the iconic scene. That is the best one. But rewatching it, I kind of forgot a little bit how brutal the second kill is when he kills the other pizzeria guy. When he just repeatedly stabs him in the face until it's just nothing but blood and mush. And I kind of forgot how brutal that scene was because I know the image of the pizzeria manager, owner, whatever he is, with the flames in his eyes because I have a T-shirt with that image on it. So I know that image very well. But I kind of forgot like how brutal it is when he just tackles the guy down and stabs his eyes out and then just continuously keeps stabbing him over and over and over again. And there's a lot of similar ones like that, obviously when he kills Mike towards the end of the movie. Also, credit to Mike, buddy. You took a hammer to the head like a champ, man. He comes back from the hammer to the head, gets killed anyways. But yeah, that opening scene with the pizzeria store guy when he just gets stabbed in the face until there's nothing left. I kind of forgot like how really relentless that was.
And that's the first art kill we see of the movie too.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're really like, oh shit, this clown is ruthless, man.
Yeah. I wish there was like a director's cut version where we see how he turned the other pizza guy into a jack-o'-lantern. Like,
Yeah.
how does that happen? Or can we get the origin story of that? It's like in the beginning of Terrifier 3 something, please.
Yeah, it always because when he does it in Terrifier 2 to the mortician or whoever, the coroner, when he does it in that one, it's also very brutal. But then when I watched this again, I was like, oh, they're like kind of walking on the same path there with those two kills. Those poor guys were just really the wrong place, the wrong time, and they got murdered real hard. Real hard. All right, let's talk about best art weapon. This is a unique category. We talk about our favorite weapon that art uses. Now, I will say, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like he does get a little more creative in Terrifier 2 than he does in Terrifier the original. But Sid, what about you? What is your favorite Art the Clown weapon in this movie?
I mean, again, it's going to be very basic, but it's the thought of using a rusty hacksaw, like to saw somebody in half. It's that for me, and that again is just like so iconic. I think the hacksaw is on the shirt that I'm wearing somewhere because I feel like you think art, you think hacksaw. That's the one.
And it's like a dirty old hacksaw. And even my wife watching it goes, that rusty little hacksaw can't cut through a body. I go, that's not the point. The point is to cut through the body. But it's the dirty and disgustingness of it. It's kind of like in Saw, in the original Saw, they're in that gross bathroom. And like, it's just the grossness of it on top of the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I went with Art's shoe. At one point, I think it's Mike. He stomps Mike's head completely off with that big old clown shoe. And I was like, how do I not pick? Like, it's clown-based kill. Like this, take notes, Killer Clowns from Outer Space Part 2. Like, that's how we're gonna do this. Like, big clown shoe smashing somebody's head into watermelon pulp. Yeah, I'm into that.
It's so simple.
Simple, effective, and clown-based.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody else notice? So we all know what clown shoes look like, and the big red floppy looking shoes. That's the typical clown shoe. When I watched it this time, I was like, did anyone get the sense that these almost look like Doc Martin clown shoes? Like they look like big combat boots, and I was like, because I'm assuming, and maybe one day we'll get Damien Leone on. I'll ask him. It looks like I'm sure he just took a pair of clown shoes and spray painted them black, or got a pair of black clown shoes. I'm sure they exist out there somewhere. But like when I was watching it this time, there are moments where it looks like he's wearing a combat boot, but it's actually Art the Clown shoes. I was like, it's almost like Doc Martin made Art the Clown shoes.
It's true. I never really even thought of that, honestly. Like, Art, who's making your shoes, buddy? That's another thing I think of. I'm like, where does Art get these things? Like, where does Art get his clothes? There's a scene where he's like texting from Dawn's phone. I'm like, Art's able to text? Like, he doesn't speak. So that's interesting.
He can text. I mean, he can use the bathroom. Apparently, we find that out a little while later. Like he's like the most miserable demon ever. He has to use the bathroom. He has to carry his weapons around in a trash bag. We know in Terrifier 2 at the beginning he has to go do laundry. Like he's got a life he has to lead on top of all this killing and maiming.
It's a hard knock life.
So for me, listen, the hacksaw is obviously iconic, but the one that always gets me, and it reminds me of the board with all the stabbing implements in the second one, This one, it's the whip with the scissors. That, when he's whipping her with the scissor weapon, that is so gnarly to think. And like, I appreciate the creativity of taking like I don't know, is that like a dominatrix whip or something, and then like tying scissors onto the end of it? Like, talk about taking something that, you know, is one thing and then turning into something completely different. Like, that to me, like, that is the antithesis of Damien Leone's creativity, when you can think like, okay, I'm going to make a cool weapon. Okay, let me take a dominatrix whip, tie scissors on the end of it, and I'm going to use that to attack a woman. And it doesn't kill her. It doesn't. It just stabs her a bunch of times with, like, it just whips against her body. But that's kind of what we're talking about earlier. Like, Art's not here to kill you gently. Like, he's not here to put you into that sweet grave. He's here to torture you. And he's literally slapping her with the scissor weapon. I'm like, God damn, that's brutal.
That is a good one. Yeah, like, he definitely, like, that's not going to kill her, and he knows that. He just wants to torture her and just, like, have fun and laugh doing it.
And I also think that that's like kind of the meanest weapon of the whole group, and I think it goes to show like maybe where Damien Leone's head was at when he came up with that weapon. Like, it's an angry weapon. Like, he was mad that day when he came up with that. And I believe he says that the string that, because he fashions it. I don't think he took a whip. He like makes it out of like a stick and an old staple. He said that the threads in it are the hair of previous victims.
Oh.
And I was like, dark. That's so dark. That's just dark as fuck. And then on the end of it is like rusty old scissors and a scalpel and some, you know, a shard of metal. And you're like, yeah, Damien that day was getting some therapy out, like getting like he was releasing it into this weapon.
Okay, I changed my answer. That's my favorite. The hair did it for me.
The hair was a crazy detail. I was like, oh my God.
We're gonna get plenty more Art the Clown. I feel like now we just need an Art the Clown prequel. Like, maybe we just need more. Like, we need to learn more about his origins, like where this bag of tricks came from. All right, next category. This is one of my favorites we do on the show, which is, can we survive this horror film? And this is the category where Patrick and I usually inject ourselves into whatever film we're watching. We ask the honest question: if we were here in this moment, would we survive this horror film? Now, Sid, we offered you the woman's perspective earlier about some of the really bad, dumb decisions that Tara and Dawn make to put themselves in Art's crosshairs. So, the honest question is, if you're in Terrifier, are you surviving?
Absolutely fucking not. There is no shot in hell. I like to think like I would put up a good fight with a lot of villains and just, you know, but God, Art the Clown, like, this dude is so brutal, and the fact that he just can't die, there's no way. There's no way. I would probably, and like, not to mention, again, if I ever saw this man in public, I would probably just like go into cardiac arrest immediately and die. Like, he would just kill me just by looking at me. So I don't think I stand a chance against Art, to be perfectly honest.
You might kill him from sadness that he like, oh, I didn't get to torture and kill her. Like, she just dropped dead 50 feet away.
That's true.
And like, you defeat Art the Clown by just dropping dead on your own.
Hey, I mean, if I have to take one for the team, then so be it.
Fair enough. And I always thought too, like, when I put this category in there, I was like, I watch Sid's like TikTok. She's smarter than all these people, but like, you can't, and this goes into my answer, you can't survive Art the Clown, and you don't want to, because when you survive Art the Clown, you end up like Vic, and I don't want to end up like Vic.
Because I mean, even look at Terrifier 2, right? Like, Sienna technically dies. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think anybody can survive this man. He got freaking beheaded and is still alive. So there's no stopping the man.
No.
Yeah, I know I wouldn't, like, in my heart of hearts, like, while I hope I'm not nearly as creepy as Mike is when we first get introduced to him standing outside the building, but when he comes back, when he gets, dude takes a hammer to the head, and I've got a hard head, so I think maybe I could take a hammer to the head. So I'd get through that. But I feel like I would be the good Samaritan that would be like, come here, let me help you. I'm going to call the cops. Like, I'm going to try you. I'd like to believe deep down inside I could play the hero for 5 minutes. But then ultimately he just kicks my head in with a pair of clown shoe Doc Martens. So no, I'm not making it out. No one's making it out of here. Like, you're not making it out of here. Like, the guy, he blew his own head off, and the coroner who was investigating it doesn't make it out of here. You're not surviving Terrifier. You're just not. If you run into Art the Clown, chances are you're going to die.
Yeah, Damon and I are Maintenance Man 1 and Maintenance Man 2. We both creep women out, but we're not making it out. As heroic as we'll be, we're not making it out. It doesn't happen.
Might go out in a blaze of glory, though, so at least you have that.
Yeah,
I would love to.
I appreciate that Mike took the hammer to the head and came back. Like, dude took it. Like, because that hammer scene was almost ended up being one of my favorite scares, where he's just like, whap, just slapped him with the hammer. I was like, damn. But Mike makes it out of that. Not much further, but he does get out of that alive. All right, let's talk real quick. And this is honestly one of my favorite categories with this particular episode, because normally what we do here is we take our film and we say, remake, sequel, or leave it alone. We say, should you remake this film? Should you give it a sequel, or should you leave it alone? Well, we obviously know Terrifier already has a sequel, and we are now getting a Terrifier 3. We've all seen the trailer. I went to the Terrifier 2 re-release specifically just because I wanted to see that little 2-minute clip. It was totally worth it. It's going to be a Christmas horror film. It's released in October of next year. So, Sid, I'll turn it to you. Listen, I know we all trust and love Damien Leone to give us another great film. He's 2 for 2 with Terrifier films. But I'm curious, in your opinion, what do you hope to get, or what do you hope to see in Terrifier 3?
So this is going to be very controversial and sound probably insane, but I saw the opening as well, and we all know that there's a child involved. And I think that is how Damien is going to top his last 2 movies. And like, again, some people don't think that kids belong in horror. I think that nobody is off limits in horror. So personally, I don't have an issue with it. And I think that's just going to like rock everybody's world. So I know he's going to do some crazy shit with that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Sid. I think no kid is safe at Christmas with Damien Leone at the helm, and so I think he's going to go there. And there's a couple of movies in horror history that go there, and they're all talked about. They're all like kind of like infamous, but like not in a bad way. They're just like, this movie went all the way. And I'd say what I am looking forward to in Terrifier 3 is that I know Damien Leone is going to shock us in a whole new way that we hadn't expected before. I did hear that it's kind of going back to the roots of Terrifier, which I thought was really appropriate about talking about Terrifier tonight, because Terrifier 3 is going to feel a lot like this one, which what I'm guessing is probably contained. It's probably going to take place either in a house or in a neighborhood, and he's going to go nasty Santa on a lot of people, and it's going to be ugly and gross, but it's going to be all about the kills and less about the story. It's just going to be like, no, Art's going to be in a Santa costume, flaying people's skin off.
I can't wait.
Now, see, here's where I'm going to digress from both of you, because while I do appreciate that, and I want that, I want the hacksaw scene, I want the poor girl getting skinned alive in Terrifier 2, I want all that as well. But I did appreciate the story elements that got introduced in Terrifier 2 and the mythology, because I don't want to turn this into a Terrifier 2 review, but like, I want to know what the hell the connection was between Sienna and her brother's dad and Art the Clown. Like, I was convinced by the end of that movie, and I actually tweeted this at Damien Leone last year when he asked about it, I was convinced that Art was actually Sienna's father.
Yeah, I was.
And I had the idea in my own head, my own writer's head, I had in my head that he was split personality. Like, he became a killer, but he tried to protect his children, which is why he drew her the outfit, he made her the sword. It was like, I'm going to turn into this killer. It was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I'm going to turn into this killer, but here is a way to protect you from me. And that's how Sienna obviously stopped Art in Terrifier 2. And I know that Damien has said that was kind of like his Dream Warriors. Like, he wanted to introduce a lot of mythology and kind of turn into like that 80s feel, which it totally did. It was awesome. I loved the soundtrack and everything. But I appreciate what he said. He has said that publicly. This is going to feel tonally closer to Terrifier than Terrifier 2. But we also know Lauren Levere is coming back. They're going to get a lot of the people who did survive to come back. My only hope is like, I'm all for another gore fest, But I do hope they continue with some of the mythology because you introduced it. I do want like that. I like that thread. I like that through line. And that's my only hope is that he doesn't totally abandon that it isn't just totally a kill fest, that we do get at least a little bit more detail around Sienna and these other characters. Cause I'm like, I was kind of fascinated by like, what's that connection?
Yeah, and I feel like with Sienna being in it, like we definitely are going to get some of that, but I feel like maybe by it being closer to Terrifier 1, like maybe it's not going to have as much of the supernatural element that it had in Terrifier 2 kind of at the end, which that part I don't necessarily mind. It's like, when the octopus comes up and grabs her and then the whole thing like that, at that point I was like, okay, this is just like a little ridiculous. I still love it. So maybe it just won't have as much of that in it, but I do hope we get more of the story because I agree. I definitely thought that Sienna's dad was Art the Clown, or they were at least like connected in some way that has not been revealed to us yet.
Yeah, I don't know that we need the glowing pit, necessarily where she gets brought back to life. I'm okay with that part not coming back, but yeah, like the story part of it. Again, it's not the deepest story. It's not like it's not. They didn't introduce like it wasn't like a ton of that, but the mythology was kind of cool. And again, like because I remember him asking that question on Twitter, like who do you think Art the Clown was, or do you think it was connected to their dad? And I was like, I totally got that vibe that somehow like either it was Art the Clown or he knew Art the Clown or had some connection to Art the Clown. And so I was totally convinced of that in the movie. And I'm like, you can't let that one go. You got to at least give us some answers for that. I want to know. So I hope that's my biggest hope is like, while I appreciate and love and I look forward to the gore and the killings and I know it's going to get creative and I'm with you, Sid. Listen, all bets are off in these movies. And I don't have children. Patrick, you do, so maybe you're a little bit more sensitive to this. I'm not. So I'm like, kill a kid. I don't care. Give me a cool kill. So maybe I'm just sick and twisted and fucked up that way. But I'm like, yeah, sure, why not?
I feel the same exact way. I'm like, again, he has to top himself somehow. So bring a kid into it. That's definitely going to do it.
To the disappointment of my extended family over the holidays, I'm with both of you.
Your kids on the living room listening to this right now, like, Dad,
he knows Dad's a weirdo. He knows Dad's a total weirdo. And they won't be watching Terrifier anytime soon.
I feel like I'm just going to throw this out there as an idea because obviously we know Terrifier 3 is coming out in October of 2024. I feel like maybe next year, Sid, you have to come back on and maybe talk with us about Terrifier 3. I think that'd be a good idea to come have a little reunion on Terrifier 3.
Yeah, we have to have it come full circle.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. All right. Last category, as I mentioned earlier, and this is the big one. That's why we're here. We are all horror fans. So at the end of the day, is it scary? So I'll open it up to you, Sid. Terrifier. Is it scary?
Again, for like people who are very hardcore horror fans, I do not think so. I think for an everyday casual horror watcher, Terrifier is probably terrifying. The whole franchise, like I just can't imagine just going into a movie thinking you're just going to watch this like cute little clown, like maybe kill a couple people and watch him cut a person open with a hacksaw, or like the second Terrifier in the bedroom scene. Like I can't imagine just like your everyday casual horror watcher watching that and being okay with it. So I think for people, especially who are like scared by gore too, because there are people who, if it's gory, it's automatically scary because they can't handle the blood and stuff. And yeah, it's definitely scary.
Yeah, there was something that very unique that happened this time around. This is like definitely more of like a deep cut hardcore horror fan type of movie. And again, my wife watches pretty much every horror movie I watch, but she doesn't watch stuff like that. She's never seen a trauma movie. She's never seen like Martyrs or anything that's like really, really crazy. And we watched that last night and I was like, so what'd you think? And she goes, I liked it. And I was like, oh, she has graduated to this group where she's like into this. And so is it scary for people like us and now my wife? It's not scary. You're not going to get scared and be afraid to turn the lights off. And if you see Art the Clown on the street, you're actually kind of going to be excited because we're horror fans and we love Art the Clown. He's not going to scare us like that. But you're right, Sid. There are certain horror fans who actually hate gore. Like they truly like don't even want to see it. So a movie like this would terrify, indeed, people who don't like gore at all. And you get the blood, the guts, and the murder. Like, it's basically, let's take Friday the 13th and dissolve what little plot it had and get right down to the goods. This is what you would call a scary movie. Yes. Is it scaring me? No. Is it scaring Sid? No. Is it scaring Damon? No. It's not even scaring my wife at this point, but it's going to deliver. She can't wait to see Terrifier 2. She just needs to be able to block out 2.5 hours so she can watch it, but she wants to watch it now.
Yeah, it's a weird one because, like you said, like it's not traditional scary in that sense. Like I'm not sitting there. This is very much what Terrifier 2 has become for me. And I know you said this earlier, that it's a comfort movie. I just enjoy watching this movie. Now that's really fucked up when you think about what happens in this movie. But yeah, but is it scary traditionally, and especially if you are grossed out by gore and or uncomfortable? Because one thing, I think the scariest aspect of this film, in my opinion, is how drawn out the murder scenes are. Like nobody dies easily. There's no just a slit of the throat. You know, no one just dies. Like you get tortured and killed, and everything is drawn out. I had kind of like the scene, even the hacksaw scene, like when her guts fall out and fall into the floor, like that's like an extra, like how could you top literally hacksawing a woman and have, oh yeah, let's just chuck her intestines on the floor mid-saw. It's that stuff. It's those little moments where it's just like, you can't believe what you're watching. It's so extreme that, yeah, in that sense, it's scary. So for, again, twisted fucks like us, no, it's not scary. But for the first-time viewer, and even I, as a first-time viewer, when I saw this, I was just like, holy shit. Like, I can't believe he's actually doing this. Like, I was shocked because no one does that. Not in American cinema. Like, I've seen Martyrs. I've seen French extremism. I've seen Audition. I've seen Japanese films that go hard. But American films typically kind of, there's like a line that doesn't get crossed, and Damien Leone is like, haha, I'm going to cross that line and run past it.
And that's what I love about him, honestly, because I feel like he does what a lot of people are just really scared to do, and he does not give a fuck.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that independent nature of him, that he just kind of made a film that no one else would make. And now Art the Clown is an icon of horror. I mean, it is on your t-shirt. It is on my wall behind me. That's how iconic Art the Clown has become. He's like, he's the new Ghostface, the new Jason, the new Freddy. Like, we need that new icon of horror, and Art the Clown has kind of become that.
Yeah, for sure. And we haven't had one of these. Like, again, obviously Ghostface, but Ghostface first came out in the 90s. Like, we haven't had a horror icon in recent times ever, really.
Yeah, Ghostface is getting on 30 years, and but here came Art, and he's like, "Oh, how about this?" And it's like, "Oh, that's fun." that's a whole new thing.
Yeah.
Iconic.
I can't wait. Can't wait for Terrifier 3. All right, folks, that is our episode for this week. Obviously, we appreciate everyone tuning in each and every week to the show. Sid, I want to give you a chance to let people know where they can find you. You have a much, much bigger following than us on TikTok, so they don't need to find you, but you are Horror Chronicles over there. But obviously, again, you've started your own show. So where can people find you if they haven't seen you or they want to check out your stuff? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so like you said, obviously I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram too. I'm not as active over there, but I post on TikTok like basically every day. But my podcast is called the Hello Sydney Podcast. It's currently on like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Google Podcasts, I believe, any of those big platforms. So check it out. I only have like 3 episodes so far, and again, the editing's not great, but we'll get there.
No, they never hesitate. I'm not a TikTok expert. That's where you excel. I am an audio engineer, so I can't help with audio. So you ever need editing help, I can help you there. Yeah, Hello Sydney. As I said, I'm jealous that you got the name because it's a better podcast name than we could come up with. I was like, when you introduced that on your, I think I saw it first time on Instagram, and I was like, God damn it, that's like the perfect podcast name. I was like, damn it, why couldn't we have something like that?
It's like I was born for this or something.
Well, obviously, yeah. So check out the Hello Sydney podcast and, of course, Horror Chronicles on TikTok. And I mean this when I say it. You are my favorite creator on TikTok. Got me so excited to follow more people doing horror over there, and got me involved in actually making a TikTok, not just becoming a curious observer. Obviously, for all of our fans, as always, check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and over on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel now as well, so you can see our reactions if you want to watch and subscribe over there as well. If you got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, we always like to hear from you guys. You can hit us up on email at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's livingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin everywhere, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And I want to say a big thank you once again to Sydney for being here with us from the Hello Sydney podcast. And of course, again, Horror Chronicles on TikTok. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. See you then.
Peace.